There is a field outside Steele's Tavern, Virginia, in Rockbridge County, where the wheat still comes up gold every July, the way it did in 1831. A small stone marker sits at the edge of it, easy to miss if you don't know to look. It marks the spot where a 22-year-old named Cyrus McCormick pulled a horse-drawn contraption of iron and wood through standing wheat and did in one afternoon what it had taken humanity 10,000 years to fail to do efficiently: cut grain without a human hand closing around a stalk.
Before that afternoon, the job of the reaper, the human being, not yet the machine, was arguably the oldest continuously practiced occupation on Earth. Longer than the blacksmith, longer than the soldier, longer, some argue, than the priest. Wherever people first stopped following herds and started planting seed, someone had to walk the rows with a sickle, bend at the waist, and cut. It was brutal, rhythmic, communal work, and it had not fundamentally changed since the first curved blade was pressed from flint in the Fertile Crescent. 6 people, working from dawn until they couldn't see, could bring in about 2 acres of wheat in a day. McCormick's reaper did 10 acres, with 2 people. By the end of that century, the job that had employed a measurable fraction of the human race since the dawn of agriculture was gone from the developed world, and it never came back. This is the story of the machine that ended it, and the company that machine became, and the company's own long fall, which farmers who are watching this right now lived through themselves. Cyrus Hall McCormick was born in 1809 on a 600-acre farm called Walnut Grove in the Shenandoah Valley, the son of a farmer named Robert McCormick, who had spent more than 20 years trying and failing to build a working mechanical reaper in his own blacksmith shop. Robert never solved it. His son did in 6 weeks, working from his father's failed frames.
In July of 1831, in a field near Steele's Tavern, owned by a neighbor named John Steele, Cyrus demonstrated the machine in public for the first time. It worked. He patented the design in 1834, and for the next decade he sold it locally, refining it season by season, before making the decision that turned a Virginia farm invention into an American industry. In 1847, he moved to Chicago. Chicago put McCormick at the center of everything the reaper needed. Rail lines running west into the prairie states where wheat could be grown by the 1,000-acre, and water access east to ship the machines out. He built a factory, established a dealer network, and did something almost nobody selling farm equipment had done before. He let farmers buy on credit and guaranteed the machine would work or he'd take it back. It was the first modern industrial sales operation built on a farm implement, and it is a large part of why the McCormick name outlived the man. He died in 1884. His company did not. In 1902, J.P. Morgan's banking house engineered the merger of the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company with its bitter rival, the Deering Harvester Company, along with 3 smaller firms. Out of that merger came the International Harvester Company, headquartered in Chicago, and it would spend the next 8 decades as one of the largest industrial manufacturers on the planet. Trucks, construction equipment, household appliances, and at its center, always, the machines that took grain out of a field. The color came later, but it came to matter as much as the name. International Harvester's Farmall tractors, introduced in the 1920s, were built and sold in a bright red that farmers across the Corn Belt learned to recognize from a moving car a quarter-mile off. An IH farm was a red farm. It told the neighbors something. It told a hired hand what kind of outfit he was walking onto before he ever met the owner. The Farmall red was not a marketing decision so much as an inheritance. It traced back toward the McCormick Reaper's original red-painted ironwork, and it stayed the visual signature of the company for the rest of its existence. The 1831 Reaper only cut the grain. It didn't gather it, didn't bind it, didn't separate the grain from the stalk. For decades after McCormick's demonstration, harvests still required armies of seasonal labor. Binders walking behind the reaper to gather and tie sheaves, threshing crews that moved from farm to farm behind steam engines, stackers, pitchers, haulers. The reaper had cut the labor bill in half,
it had not eliminated the harvest hand. What finished that job was the combine harvester, a single machine that cut, threshed, and separated grain in one pass across a field, replacing not the reaper alone, but the entire seasonal choreography of binder crews and threshing gangs that had grown up around it. International Harvester built combines at its plant in East Moline, Illinois, and by the middle of the 20th century, a single machine and its driver could do in an afternoon what had once required a rotating crew of a dozen or more men moving farm to farm through an entire county each August.
The itinerant threshing crew, men who followed the harvest north from Texas to the Dakotas as the wheat ripened, sleeping in barns and boarding houses paid by the day, largely disappeared within a single generation. It is difficult to find a harvest crew boarding house still operating anywhere in the wheat belt today. The job simply stopped existing in the form it had existed in for 10,000 years. By the early 1980s, International Harvester was a company in visible trouble, not because the machines had stopped working, but because the market underneath them had. Between 1981 and 1986, American agriculture went through a debt crisis that farmers who lived through it still describe as the hardest years of their working lives. Land values that had climbed through the 1970s collapsed. Interest rates, which the Federal Reserve had pushed into the high teens to fight inflation, left heavily leveraged farm operations unable to service the debt they'd taken on to expand. Farms across the Midwest went to auction by the thousand, and the equipment dealers who depended on those same farmers to buy new machinery watched order books empty out season after season.
International Harvester was also carrying the weight of a bruising, prolonged labor strike earlier in the decade, and years of executive decisions that had spread the company thin across trucks, construction gear, and household products, even as its founding business, farm equipment, needed investment it wasn't getting. The company that had once been synonymous with the American harvest was bleeding money it did not have a plan to stop. On November 26, 1984, International Harvester announced it would sell its agricultural equipment division, the business Cyrus McCormick had founded a century and a half earlier, to Tenneco, a Houston-based energy conglomerate, for $430 million in cash and stock. Tenneco folded the acquired IH lines into its existing subsidiary, J.I. Case, to form Case IH. Tractor production at Harvester's Farmall Works in Rock Island, Illinois, the plant that had built the tractor line carrying the company's own founding name, ceased in May of 1985. Production of the newly combined Case IH tractor line moved to J.I. Case's own factory in Racine, Wisconsin. The remainder of International Harvester, no longer in the farm business at all after 150-some years, renamed itself Navistar International the following year and kept building trucks. The company that had ended the world's oldest farming job had, in the end, been unable to survive the collapse of the industry it built its fortune ending that job to serve. The Farmall Works plant in Rock Island once employed thousands of people in a single building complex along the Mississippi River. Rock Island and the surrounding Quad Cities region, which also hosted John Deere's headquarters and other heavy manufacturing, went through a hard contraction through the 1980s as farm equipment manufacturing consolidated and jobs left the region. Like much of the industrial Rivertown Midwest, the Quad Cities has spent the decades since working to diversify beyond the farm machinery employment base that once defined it, with mixed and uneven success from town to town. Red paint does not sit on a landscape the way it once did in that stretch of the Rock River Valley. The company is gone. Some of the buildings are gone with it. Others still stand, repurposed, holding businesses that have nothing to do with a reaper or a combine. None of this ended the machines themselves. It only ended the company that built them under that name. Right now, in sheds and machine barns from Ohio to eastern Nebraska, there are International Harvester tractors, Farmalls mostly, in every letter series the company ever built, that have been kept running by the same families for 2, sometimes 3 generations. Antique tractor shows and county fairs across the Corn Belt still schedule IH pulling and plowing demonstrations every summer, and the people who show up to run them are not doing it for prize money.
They are doing it because somebody taught them how, and they intend to teach someone else.
There are IH collector clubs in nearly every farm state, dealer sign collections in barns that have become informal museums, and parts networks entirely built by enthusiasts with no corporate backing at all that keep 60 and 70-year-old farmalls in working order. The knowledge of how to time a magneto or rebuild a farmall carburetor does not live in any company archive anymore, because the company that would have kept that archive does not exist. It lives in people. It is passed hand to hand, the same way the sickle work itself was once passed hand to hand for 10,000 years before McCormick's Field outside Steele's Tavern changed what that phrase meant.
The oldest job in farming did not disappear because anyone wanted to erase it. It disappeared because a Virginia farm boy solved a problem that had outlasted every civilization that had ever tried to solve it. And the solution worked too well to leave any room for the old way to survive beside it. What is easy to miss, standing at that small stone marker in Rockbridge County today, is that the machine did not just replace a job. It replaced a rhythm, the communal, seasonal, backbreaking choreography of an entire community moving together through a ripening field that had shaped how rural people organized their lives since before anyone was keeping a written record of how they organized anything. The company that industrialized the end of that rhythm went on to dominate American agriculture for 150 years. And then it too came apart, for reasons that had nothing to do with the machines and everything to do with debt, interest rates, and a decade the farm country has not forgotten.
The Reaper is not the story. The company built on the Reaper is not the story either. Not really. The story is the 2 acres a day, and the 10, and everything that changed in the space between those two numbers, and how little of it can ever be gotten back, no matter how carefully a family in a shed in Nebraska keeps the old red paint from rusting through. If your grandfather ran one of these, or if you've stood in a field like the one outside Steele's Tavern and felt how quiet it is now, the next story in this series is one you'll want to hear.